Text is on 2442. You can, of course, tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya. You can also join us on our Facebook page. We'd want to hear from you. What was your experience when you were voting? Did you face any frustrations? Did you witness any irregularities that you feel should have been handled in a better manner? Send us your thoughts and views, and in the course of the next few hours, we're going to be able to share those on air just to be sure that we are also keeping a keen eye on this election process. Of course, this is the mark here. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little far. I got mine marked in between my fingers. Of course, my cameraman is just going to zoom in on that. That's a mark and a sign that I have already cast my ballot. That's it right over there in between my fingers. A lot of other people have them on their little finger, on their pinky. Of course, then a sign that you have been able to cast your ballot. Many thanks for that. It's an experience that I believe a lot of people, everyone, especially if you're eligible to vote, should be able to go through. It is something that, of course, is going to be talked about for the next few weeks, even months, when we finally know and understand what our new government is going to look like. As we said, we will be able to hear from James Oswago a little later on. But first, let's take you to other stories that we're following for you, still election-related. And, of course, a clerk has been arrested in Kitui Central constituency for issuing more than one ballot paper to voters. Salim Bilu, who has pitched camp in Kitui County, gives us an overview of the situation in Kitui County.
It may have been a slow start to the exercise in Kitui County, but as soon as the polling stations opened, voters have taken an average of 4 minutes to cast their vote. This has meant that by now there are no long and winding queues in most of the polling stations that we have been to. Of course,
process hapa dadi sio ngumu, ni mzuri tu, nimechukua dakika 5 kumaliza. Kwa sasa naelekea nyumbani.
Most of the presiding officers and their deputies who we've managed to speak to are optimistic that the exercise will be able to conclude in good time.
Well, we started a bit late, but it was due to some logistical problem. As I've said, Central is the largest polling station. We have 5 streams. And as per now, we are happy, we are doing well. We started late, and as the regulation says, we are going to add some time. So long after 5, we have people on the line, all people are going to vote.
Of course, Kitui remains an area of focus given the key contest for both the governor and senator seats. 2 of the candidates vying for the governor's seat, Kiama Kilonzo and Dr. Julius Malombe, voted at about 8:30 a.m.
We have just finished voting in this local polling station. The process started late. Yeah, I must admit that. I think they started about 6:30 as opposed to 6. I think it has been fairly smooth. The machines are working, and I can see we are just taking an interval of about 5 minutes to vote each.
ID from.
Did not open on time. They were 1.25 hours late because they were supposed to open at 6, but they opened at 7:15. The voter identification machine was not functioning well, but they have been able to sort it out.
Voters are, of course, still turning up in the 164 polling stations in Kitui Central constituency to exercise their democratic right. For instance, at Muslim Secondary School, there are 152 registered voters, and as it stands, 90 have voted. A clerk was earlier arrested in the same polling station for issuing more than one ballot paper per candidate. There are 2 tallying centers in Kitui County, that is Kitui Multipurpose Hall and Kitui High School. Of course, we'll be keeping you updated, but for now, back to you.
All right, thank you for that, Salim Bilu. Kitui, of course, remaining a battleground zone that we're going to be keeping tabs on. 1.3 million people live in Kitui, but only a third of them were registered voters. We'll take a look at what the total and complete voter turnout was a little later on as the hours continue to tick away. Now, of course, we're going elsewhere to Nyeri. Now, it's interesting, earlier on speaking to Wahiga Mwaura, and we're going to hear from him in just a few minutes, he said the queues there were not actually as long as they've been in a lot of other places, particularly here in Nairobi. And but they do say, even though the queues were shorter, it seems like the voting process was still way too long. And so they feel like there could have been a lot more provided in terms of resources, like the BVR kits, to make the voting process smooth sailing. But we'll probably hear more from Wahiga Mwaura himself. He now joins us live from Nyeri. Wahiga.
Right, Janet, I'm getting you loud and clear. And indeed, I think those who chose to vote in Nyeri County actually made the right decision because the queues here have not been in any way similar to what you've seen across the country. I mean, I was looking earlier on at what was happening in Nairobi, what was happening in Eldoret, and it is simply unbelievable. Now, this is the line that's going into the Nairobi Technical Training Institute classroom, and the Nyeri, I beg your pardon, Nyeri Technical Training Institute classroom, and this is the end of the line, and there is a gentleman here guarding this place so that nobody can join after this, because it's a couple of minutes after 5, and as per the deadlines, no one was supposed to be able to access this area after 5, except those who are that were in the queue, and they are the ones now who will be given the privilege of voting. Now, so far, 641 people have managed to vote out of the 802 that had been registered here, and according to Mr. Timothy Nkonge, the presiding officer, there have been a couple of challenges. Now, we haven't seen the long queues that we've seen elsewhere. We haven't had any incidences, but there have been complaints that some people have been taking 2-3 hours to vote. And we posed the question to him, if the queues are not very long and if there are no incidents, why is it taking so long for people to vote? And he said, number one, the BVR machine is posing a challenge, rejecting people's fingerprints. Some have to try it twice, thrice, and it is frustrating. Secondly, making a choice, you have some have called it 6 questions. Someone actually gave me an example and said, sometimes it takes you 3 hours to do a 3-question exam. So when it comes to 6 questions of who you select as your member of National Assembly, who you select as your president and so forth, that could take even longer. So when you're giving someone a minute to make all those 6 decisions, then you expect them to take much longer, and you cannot hurry them. So some people have taken 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We spoke earlier to a lady who took 4 hours on the line before she actually got her chance to vote, and she said nobody can rush her. She is going to take her time and make sure she makes the right decision. And I know, Janet, you'd probably be wondering, why did people not make their decisions before they came here? Well, voting is a democratic right, and you are allowed to think about it before. And even when you get to the ballot box, you can still change your mind if you want to. So the whole idea is to be patient. Of course, any elderly people who came here were escorted to the front. Any pregnant ladies as well, they were given that courtesy that is due to them. So, I mean, we are seeing a lot of teamwork and team spirit here, and being one's keeper. Strategic material also, I mean, just everything in this center going well. We also managed to drive around Nyeri town about 30 minutes ago, and we noticed most of the polling stations are quiet, just an indication that a lot of the work here is done. A lot of the people here have voted. A couple of shops have opened as well, and business is going on as usual, even though it's not as a regular Monday would have been. That is the situation right now in Nyeri County. We'll bring you updates even as we continue this line. We hope it doesn't take very long to finish, and then after that, the clerks will be given 10-15 minutes to catch a breather, because they have been working straight through from morning. And then immediately after that, the counting begins, and we'll bring you the updates from the Nyeri Technical Training Institute and other strategic locations around Nyeri County. But for now, back to you, Janet Mbogwa in studio.
All right, thank you for that, Wahiga. Indeed, you raised an interesting point. A lot of people saying they deserve their right to stay in line, or rather at the voting booth, for at least 15 minutes to make up their minds. Some might argue they should have made up their minds months ago even. Thank you for bringing us that interesting aspect of the voting process. So, of course, voting in Nyeri seems to be going pretty smoothly. We'll go back to Wahiga Mwaura and just take a look at exactly how the process will continue in Nyeri. 20 minutes past 5, so voting has officially closed, but of course in a lot of places the queues are still long, and there's going to be a couple more hours extended for those people who've been waiting in line for hours. And one of those places is in Kisumu. Now, of course, Willis Raburu joins us. He's in Kisumu County, and he's going to bring us a similar story to Nyeri. Apparently, Willis, who I spoke to a little earlier on, saying the queues are a little shorter. Some places actually have officially finished with the voting process. What can you tell us?
Very good afternoon to you, Janet. I can't quite hear you very clearly, but yes, there has been the overriding issue today has been voter turnout, and just speaking to some of the presiding officers here, they said that the turnout has been good. We're talking about 90%, 85%, 80%. Remember, here in the Jomo Kenyatta Sports Ground, they have been divided into about 9 streams, and if you can see, most of them here, there are a few people only left in some of the queues. Most of them are about to close, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then they will close this exercise. But remember, in the morning we had showed you this particular center had a lot of people who'd come here, and so it is very it is something that maybe the IBC needs to be lauded for having completed this exercise with all the number of people that were here. And now in about 1 minute, basically, by the time maybe I'll have finished this link, they would have already closed the exercise. We were also able to get a few pictures of some of the other people who are casting their ballots today. We had Jack Nguma earlier on. We also were able to get the TNA Secretary General Onyango Olo also casting his ballot here in Kisumu. He cast it in the Manyata Primary School here in Kisumu, so he was also able to cast his ballot there. Also, we had spoken earlier to Professor I beg your pardon, Anyang Nyong'o also, and his sentiments also just simply asking for peace, and also telling the people that despite the irregularities, that they should be confident that the IBC will continue to deliver a credible poll as well. But again, just to emphasize that here, Janet, in Kisumu County, the voter turnout was very impressive. Remember, we've also been to the social hall. We've also been to the Kisumu Polytechnic. We've also been to Manyata Primary, and these are in all these areas, save for Manyata Primary, where there was still some delays. So they will be probably closing in the next 25 minutes or so, because when we went there, there were still so many people on the queues. And so what that means is that people at around this time, the doors will close, but then the people who are still on the queues will still be allowed to cast their ballot. Janet.
Thank you so much for that, Willis. You can see Willis Raburu coming to us live from Kisumu, giving us an update on the voting process. They're still ongoing in some areas. We'll come back and check about an hour or so, even shorter, just to see whether or not it's gotten any better, whether the lines, of course, are getting any shorter. So Kisumu and Nyeri, so far so good. We don't have the kinds of lines that we've seen in Eldoret and in Nairobi as well. So we'll check in on a lot of our other reporters across various counties, including Kakamega, as well as Mombasa, where Esther Kahumbi is standing by. So we're going to talk to them a little later on. Let's now shift our focus to Nakuru. And Nakuru County has also extended voting hours at most polling stations to allow hundreds of voters who are still on the queue to vote. Here's George Kariuki, who is in Nakuru, with that report.
Voting in Nakuru started late in most polling stations, with electricity being the major delay.
Nilifika hapa masaa saa 9 na dakika 10. Nikafikishwa hapa na motorbike. Nikasikia ndio agent wenye walikuwa ndani wanashawa.
Residents were waiting for hours before they were allowed to vote. Former President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi was the first to vote at Moi Primary Kabarak at 6:10 a.m. Lawrence Bomet, who's running for the gubernatorial seat on an ODM ticket for Nakuru County, cast his vote at Ngata Primary School, where he followed the queue like the rest of the residents.
Crowds are big. I didn't even expect this kind of turnout, but it's amazing how the people have decided to vote. And from what I hear all over Kenya, people have decided that they must vote.
His contender from TNA, Kinuthia Mbogwa, cast his vote in Molo, where he too joined the line. He shared the same sentiments as his ODM counterpart.
I'm very pleased with the voters' turnout in Nakuru County.
Now, most polling stations in Nakuru County might end up having to extend their voting hours due to the large numbers. Where I am right now, at Shalom Primary in Giwa Farm, does not have that problem. This is where most displaced persons were resettled. Let's hear what they have to say.
Nimeamua kupiga kile kura nione au kutakuwa na mabadiliko. Kama ni kushiba tupate chakula, sasa tuko na kashamba, mtu apate mbegu alime, apate chakula ya kutosha.
Na nilitoka Banti Forest nikaletwa hapa na serikali. Sasa hapa mimi ni mmoja wa wenye walipewa shamba. Sasa sisi hatuna shida, hakuna shida hapa. Tumekaa vizuri, hatuoni mabadiliko sasa.
George Kariuki from Nakuru.
Many thanks for that, George, bringing us that update there from Nakuru. Again, of course, voting has been extended there. As the IEBC had said, if you're still in line past 5 p.m., they will allow you to vote. It'll be interesting to see exactly what time they would officially close those lines, considering some of them still have hundreds of people in them. Does this mean that voting could go on into the night? We'll be waiting to see what the process will look like across various counties. We continue with election news, where 5 men had been arrested in Kangeta Igembe Central constituency for alleged voter buying. Similar cases have been reported in Makiri, Imenti. In the meantime, many voters in Kilifi will not vote as polling stations closed at 5 due to insecurity in the area. Electoral officials say they could not extend the voting hours owing to alleged threats from the Mombasa Republican Council. So, of course, some sad news there for residents in Kilifi. Many apologies to you. I'm sure a lot of them are extremely frustrated, perhaps because some of the voting areas and the voting polling stations opened quite late. They were still forced to leave a little earlier on due to insecurity in that area. Again, security, particularly in the coastal region, has been coming up a lot throughout the day. Police, however, say that they've deployed extra personnel to ensure that it's kept, they keep a tight lid on it and make sure that Kenyans are able to continue with the voting process. For now, though, I want us to go over to the press conference that was held earlier on by the IEBC CEO, James Oswago. He gave a briefing at the National Tallying Center at the Bombers of Kenya. Let's take a listen.
The opportunity for all people who have turned out and who have queued for a long time in order to vote without denying them the chance or disenfranchising them. The Commission regrets the sudden death of 6 security officers in Mombasa last night in the service of their country, but in particular in attempting to enforce a secure environment within which elections can be conducted. We wish to state that polling is still continuing in all the stations, and even in areas where there were disruptions, polling has been restored and is continuing and will continue until the time that they are closed. When polling stations close, the next stage will begin, and that is the stage of electronic transmission of results. As has been stated before, we will start with the electronic transmission of the provisional results relating to the presidential elections. Those will be received live in this building, and the media will be facilitated a direct link. We want to emphasize that as the information hits the screens in this building, it will be facilitated and availed to the media at the same time as we receive it. There will be no intermediary or intermediary point of managing that information. That point should be understood. There will be another briefing
Kibisu
in 2 or 3 hours from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
There we have it. Of course, James Oswago, the CEO of the IEBC, held a press briefing just over an hour ago, and he talked about the fact that he's fully aware of some of the inconsistencies that happened across various polling stations with regards to there not being sufficient BVR kits, material, in some cases names missing from the ballot papers. He is assuring Kenyans that they're fully aware and are looking into these issues. He also talked a little bit about the Mombasa situation and the fact that, again, as I had mentioned earlier, security has been deployed again, particularly in areas that have been hard hit with security threats, and he wants to assure people that they are looking out for Kenyans just to ensure that the voting process is one that's memorable, but for all the right reasons. Now, of course, a lot of people were also talking about and are telling me as well on Twitter, talking about the fact that this voting process where they were was smooth and peaceful. That's, of course, Ronnie Chagua Amani. That's his Twitter handle. Thank you so much for that. A lot of others saying, I waited in line for many hours, but 6 bottles of water later, I finally voted. So, of course, a lot of people taking the chance, come what may, and doesn't matter how many hours they stay in those lines to cast their ballot, put their mark on history, because as many have said, if you don't vote, someone else will do it for you, and the result may not be what you are looking for. I applaud Kenyans for coming out in large numbers. We do hope that those of you who are still standing in queues are going to get the chance to cast your ballot. Keep us posted on what is happening in your polling station. Text us on 2442, tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya, and of course join us on Facebook as well. The Citizen TV is that fan page, and tell us a little bit more about your experiences, whether or not you were able to reach the IEBC, whether or not your concerns were addressed. So we'd like to keep talking to you about that. And of course, once the results begin to trickle in, we're going to be taking a special focus on those battleground counties, which may or may not tilt the scale and tilt the election in either direction. We're going to tell you more about that in the coming hours. We'll focus on that and take a look at how people came out to vote in those counties. For now, though, just down the road, of course, from the Royal Media Services offices at the St. George's Primary School, another polling station, Francis Kashuri is standing by. Francis is there just to give us a look and feel of what the voting process is like there, whether the lines have eventually gone down. Francis, I was there as early as 5:30 this morning. The queue stretched out so far, I could not believe my eyes. What does it look like right now?
Thank you very much, and good evening, Janet. Indeed, the polling process has come to a close here at St. George's Primary School. This is Dagoretti North Constituency, Nairobi County. And after the queues were over, and once the clock struck 5 p.m., there were no people waiting around, so the polling officers had to bring it to a close. So now we are moving to the next step of vote counting and eventually vote tallying. And to take us through the steps of exactly what will be happening in this second step of this critical polling process is the presiding officer. Karibu sana, madam. Maybe you will take us through what will be happening during the entire process, what we can expect. We see the tables have been laid. So from here, where do we move to?
Okay, after closing,
can you look at the camera and hold the microphone for you?
After closing, we are going to start counting, but we don't start immediately. Of course, the clerks have been working very hard since morning. They have not even had the time to stretch their feet, because voters started coming as early as 4 a.m. and actually they came in large numbers, and by 3, it's like we didn't have any queues remaining. So now the clerks are taking a break of about 10 minutes, and actually, as you can see in the background, we have already arranged the table for counting. Actually, what we have done is to convert the polling room to the counting room, and once the room is set, as you can see, then I am going to brief the agents and the observers who are here with me on what rules we are going to follow. We have to agree on a few things. Of course, now we don't know what papers are found in the ballot boxes. Some may not be marked properly, and therefore we are going to agree on which papers we are going to count as rejected, which ones are valid. And at the same time, I'm going to give my officials, the clerks and the DPOs, some duties to do. Of course, I'll be assigning them on sorting out the papers. And when it comes to counting for each candidate, I'll be assigning each clerk to be counting depending on the number of candidates we have.
We have 6 ballot boxes there. Which one are we going to start with, the presidential or the county assembly?
We are going to start with the presidential ballot box. Yeah.
And then there's a whole question of sorting out the ballot papers, the rejected ballot papers, and so on and so forth. Is it possible, for example, instantly to tell us what will constitute a rejected ballot paper or a spoiled ballot paper?
Okay, to start with, when we open the ballot boxes, we are going to empty the boxes and put all the papers on the table. And then as we unfold them, we are going to check whether they are stamped at the back with a rubber stamp labeled IEPC. If we get any ballot paper which is not labeled, which is not stamped, then that one automatically is rejected. When we go through the whole batch of ballot papers, after that, now we are going to sort them for each candidate. Now that's when we are going to display them to the people who are in the room. They see each ballot paper belongs to which candidate, and if it is not marked properly, then again, it stands a chance of being rejected.
When you talk about marked properly, we've had instances of people, for example, they want candidate A, they tick the candidate A, then they don't want the other candidates, they cross. Wanasema tunataka huyu lakini sitaki huyu, unapiga XXXX. What happens to that, such kind of a ballot paper?
Now, that is a misconception because they are supposed to put only one mark, because even X is a valid mark. So when they put so many of them, then that ballot paper is rejected. And we don't expect to get many of those ballot papers because further education was done before.
Maybe a last question. You have 6 ballot boxes and 6 ballot papers. What will happen, for example, if you go to the presidential ballot box and you find a governor ballot paper there?
Oh, that one, we count it. Actually, we don't count it. We regard it as a foreign object in that particular box, and therefore it's rejected. It's like getting a goat amongst the cows. Yeah.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. We look forward to the entire process as your officers take a short break, then we'll get into the business proper. Janet, there you have it. Interesting remarks here by the presiding officer that, for example, if you find a ballot paper that doesn't belong to that category, for example, if it is the presidential ballot box, and you find a governor's ballot paper, that will be termed a foreign object. It's like she says, having a goat among cows. So it will be a very interesting exercise here. So the officers are taking a short break, but immediately after that break, this polling station will be turned into a counting center, and we surely will be here to ensure that we capture the moments for our viewers when the counting starts, and of course, eventually when we start receiving provisional results. And she stated we are starting with the presidential tally. So as soon as that break is over, we should be, in a short while, be able to know in this particular polling station which presidential candidate is leading. Be sure to join us. Back to you, Janet.
All right, Francis. That's, of course, in a couple of hours. Thank you for that. Again, interesting, the exercises there. And, of course, talking about the so-called spoiled vote. I think we saw that a lot yesterday over the last few days on Citizen TV. Officials telling us what a spoiled vote is. You know, some people taking the candidates of their choice, but putting a cross against the candidates that they do not want to vote for. That's a spoiled vote. We're hoping that all the voter education that we carried out over the last few days, you've been able to carry that with you to the polling stations. It would be such a terrible thing if you've voted in the wrong way, and that's a wasted vote altogether. But, of course, we are going to keep you posted on how that turns out. St. George's Primary School, they've officially closed. The clerks are taking a break. They're setting up the room to make sure that they are able to start the counting process. The clerks and the election observers are going to be briefed on the various rules to be taken, what to identify as various rules and irregularities. And then, as Francis Kashuri told us, in a couple of hours, we could have a clear indication of who, at least in St. George's Primary, is leading in the race to State House. For now, though, earlier on, I had shown you my inked finger. I think there's a lot of people that are doubting me, including my director. So I'm going to show you again. I did vote this morning. I'll see if our cameraman is able to zoom in right in between my fingers. A lot of you also talking to me on Twitter saying the same thing, asking, Janet, have you voted? I have. There we have that mark over there. It was either in between the finger and the little finger, the index finger. So there we have it. That's my mark. I voted early in the morning. For all of you who are doubting. Thank you very much. And of course, a lot of you tweeting pictures as well of, getting inked, as it's being called right now. You can send them through to us. Of course, we'd love to see them. Again, you can share with us your experiences of how the voting process went. And of course, in moments, we are going to continue following up on the lines and the queues across various counties. You know, Willis and Wahiga have already told us about Kisumu and Nyeri, St. George's Primary here in Nairobi. A lot of the queues there getting a lot shorter. It was a bit different in Eldoret, but we'll see how that goes. Right now, though, let's move on to Kakamega, and closing of some polling stations in Kakamega County has been extended to cover for time wasted in sorting logistical problems in the morning. IEBC Lower Western Coordinator, which George Oyugi has raised fears that voting in some situations might go on until 10 p.m. and the tallying process could start after midnight. Judy Kosgei talked to Oyugi, who says they were faced with many technical problems. Let's take a look.
Just minutes before the official close of polls in Kenya and of course in Kakamega County, and the queues are still very long in a number of polling stations here. We are at Muyala polling station, which is a secondary school in Lurambi constituency, Kakamega County, and the question people are asking is, why have they been almost on the same spot for so long? Because the queues are still as long as they were in the morning. To answer that question is Lower Western IEBC Coordinator George Oyugi, who is with me here. We understand the problem here because we know that the number of registered voters are over 500,000 and you'd foreseen this. But did you think that it will be this bad?
Well, the voters turned up very early in the morning, as early as 5 o'clock, and there were actually many, and the queue is still very long. The problem we have at this particular station is that the register was not organized in alphabetical order. We have two streams at this polling station, stream A and stream B. They are all the register is the same. We did not separate this are stream A and this are stream B. So that brings a very big problem when someone has lined all the way up to stream A, up to the door, then he's being told that you are in stream B. So what the POs are doing, that once you have lined and you have reached the door and you are told you are in stream B, they will take you over the other side, and that's consuming a lot of time. So people are actually complaining that the queue is not moving.
You're coordinating both Vihiga and Kakamega counties, but we've gone to Vihiga and we've seen that the process was very smooth. It's only majorly in Kakamega County where we are seeing the problem. The machines are not working, the register names missing in the register. So why Kakamega County?
Well, Vihiga has got a very few population, 202,000 almost. Kakamega has got 571,000. So that explains why it can be a big problem when register was being prepared. But I hope things will work out well.
You talked about maybe in some polling station people could actually vote up to 10 p.m. Is that a possibility? Because 10 p.m. is quite late.
Well, in this station, the way I look at things, these people are on the queue. For them to finish this queue, the queue would be around 10 o'clock if they don't decide to go home. And that means the law says that those people who are in the queue should not be sent home. They will be allowed to vote. And because the process is slow, it might finish late, maybe at 10 o'clock.
So what time do you expect probably the tally of the governor set, the senatorial, the senators, and of course all the other sets? What time will the tallying of the results begin?
Yeah, for them to finish voting here and then they'll do the counting, it will be around midnight. And then we expect them that by 1 o'clock they'll bring to they'll actually take the results to the tallying center. Then from the tallying center, by around 2 or 3, they'll go to the county.
Okay, now we've seen the situation on the ground. It's not only these polling stations. This polling station, I beg your pardon, there's so many other polling stations which people are still voting. What have you done to ensure that there is enough security for these voters?
Well, the security arrangement was 2 per stream. We don't have actual main security in Kakamega and Vihiga have been posted to polling stations. But if there is any additional security in hotspots, we will be able to provide.
You're talking about 2 security officers, 2 policemen in a station, policemen or women in a station. And looking at the number of people here, there's so many people. Will that, the ratio there does not look right?
Well, the people here, I think there are people who work on Amani, therefore there will not be a problem. and late in the evening when they'll be counting, when we might decide to increase the security.
That was George Oyugi, the IEBC coordinator, Lower Western Region, that is Vihiga County and Kakamega County. We will give you the latest from these two counties and, of course, from Bungoma and also Busia County.
All right, thank you, Judy Kosgei, talking to us from Kakamega. Again, another pretty crucial county that we're going to be looking at within, of course, the gubernatorial and senatorial races. So we'll come back and analyze that aspect of the elections a little later on as the results officially begin to trickle in. A little concern there, and Judy raised it as well, some voting stations closing as late as 10 p.m. I know in some of the interviews we held with IEBC officials over the last few days, we asked them, how ready are you to handle that? The voting process going in at night in the past hasn't been particularly healthy, so to speak, for the entire voting process. So we're hoping that, of course, they're able to see that everything continues to be smooth sailing. Issues might arise if there's hundreds of people there all the way until late in the night. So we are going to keep checking up on those areas, particularly where we know voters started the voting process very late. Some polling stations opened at 7, 8, even 9 a.m. in some instances, and therefore they have been forced to wait out the hours as well. Thank you so much for all of your messages coming in. Others saying, I can say that I voted. There were some problems, but they were sorted out quickly thanks to the IEBC. Others saying, of course, I voted too, and I am inked, and I am proud. So a lot of you sending in your tweets, your SMSs, of course, your text messages, sharing your experiences with us as we wait for the voting stations in some parts of the country to be officially closed, which might be as late as, of course, 9 or 10 p.m. in the night. Now, some of the challenges as well is that about 60% of the voters, according to statistics across the country, needed assistance to cast their ballots. Of course, we're talking about illiteracy rates. We're also talking about the elderly who needed to be helped. We'd want to hear from you whether or not you saw that going on in a smooth sailing manner, whether you thought that some people were being treated unfairly. Those are some of the things that we hope to hear from, because it does affect the voting system at the end of the day. We are hoping that most of the 14.3 million registered voters across Kenya were able to cast their ballot for the president, senator, governor, county woman rep, county ward representative, and member of parliament of their choice as we officially begin to bring you the results as soon as voting is officially closed. The National Tallying Center, the Bombers of Kenya, Abdi Osman, is there at the moment. At some point, we're hoping we can talk to him about how the preparedness and the preparations that are going on as the results begin to be brought into that tallying center. So looks like over the next couple of hours, perhaps before the end of tomorrow, if it is at all what we were hoping the whole process would be, we'll be able to have an indication of what the final outcome will be. So do keep talking to us. And just a recap, of course, 33,000 polling stations, a couple of thousand election observers as well. We have election observers from across various parts of Europe, particularly just keeping a keen eye on how the election process is going on, and also just being able to analyze it for us, and we'll be able to hear that feedback once the process is over. 99,000 security personnel in total were deployed. An additional 400 or so were added in Mombasa, just to be able to keep a tight lid on the security issues there. Security issues which have even affected the voting in Kilifi, where a lot of people were not allowed to continue voting past 5 o'clock because of security concerns in that area. We're hoping it's the last we'll hear of that. We will continue to get updates on the security situation in Mombasa and in Garissa as well, where, of course, there were also concerns there of security threats. Let's also take a look at some of the counties that are going to be interesting to look at, Garissa being one of them. Garissa had a low number of voters registered. We'll find out about the turnout in Garissa. Of course, there we're looking at a battle between Cord and Jubilee. Garissa is essentially a swing county. And of course, the gubernatorial race particularly in that instance. Now, of course, when it comes to Garissa, we think of security, and this will be really the next government will be looking at taking care of security issues there. Foreign policy, of course, being a main issue there. You have, of course, to remember that it has one of the longest borders with Somalia, along with Wajir and Mandera. A lot of the concerns there about threats of any kind of upheavals, particularly from the Al-Shabaab militia group. We haven't heard any of that. We're just giving you an indication of what experts were a little nervous about. So far, none of those reports have reached us. As soon as they do, we will be able to give them to you. So, of course, that's just a look at the voting, the electoral process so far today. Voting, of course, started as early as, let's take a look, and of course, earlier on, we told you that voting had started as early as 6 a.m. in some polling stations and as late as 9 a.m. in others. We'd also told you that a clerk was arrested, of course, in some parts in Kitui Central constituency for issuing more than one ballot paper to voters. We're going to be able to listen in on what transpired with Salim Bilu, who interviewed the OCPD of Kitui Central. We're going to bring you that footage a little later on and take a look at what it looks like. Let's now give you a look at what's happened throughout the day today. I'm not sure if that's a video that we're going to be showing you. Let's take a look at video footage of the highlights of the voting today.
Because of a long list of candidates and a very new system, I've noticed that the machine here using batteries is at least working. I'm told in a lot of other places the BVR system seems to be having problems, but I'm told also that IEBC are doing the best they can to rectify, because the taxpayers spend a lot of money to procure this equipment. So it's only fair that it's seen to work. I want to urge patience, because there are long queues, reported long queues across the country. I want to urge all the voters to remain patient and to make sure they vote, because anybody missing out on this very historic exercise will, I'm sure, feel left out of trying to change this country forever.
Reports reaching us indicate that there was a gang clad in black and red headbands that was disturbing the peace, a breach of the peace rather, and police officers were alerted at Changama police station. They made their way here, and we understand that a confrontation ensued right around 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. this morning, and as a result, the OCS, the OCPD, 4 other security officers lost their lives in the line of duty. We do also understand that some of the suspected members of this gang were also killed in the night incident.
So security is in place. As you can see, the pictures even that we have of security officers leaving, continuing to be deployed in the various stations as polling continues.
The process was very smooth, and the queuing is moving very fast. Things are moving fluently here.
In case there's anyone who needs help to vote, the agents are called upon to witness that. Despite people closing their businesses throughout town, of course, for obvious reasons, to turn out to vote.
So far, 390 voters have voted here. They're expecting another 415, which is a bit tight, of course, to come through here. The good news is, though, the BVR kit has worked pretty well for everyone. We haven't had any situation where nobody was in that kit or in the registry, as we are hearing in other counties. So far, everyone has been processed here well, and this is because they are saying the electricity connection is pretty stable. They did not have to rely on generators or anything of the sort.
just some of the candidates who voted earlier on, the candidates for the governor's position, the senator's position. Back here to the polling station, you can see this, the process is moving smoothly, and because of the complexity of this vote, they have an official standing by just to help anyone who may get confused with the color codes and everything, so just to ensure that they cast their ballot as they should.
A look at the highlights there. Of course, our team across the country, various, of course, political heavyweights and politicians, as well as presidential candidates casting their ballots across various parts of the country. That's a look at our highlights and what we've been doing for you all day on Citizen TV. We'll continue to bring you those highlights, of course, later on, as well as we continue to recap the highlights of what happened today. It is now 3 minutes, just a few minutes to 6 p.m., an hour past the official time for polling stations to close. Some of them have already closed. We saw that at St. George's Primary, where Francis Kashuri gave us those details. The clerks at the moment taking a breather after a hard day's work, preparing the whole room to be able to begin the counting process, to be able to set rules and regulations for what they will consider spoiled votes and what will make it to the National Tallying Center at the Bombers of Kenya. So that's the look at the situation right now, keeping in mind that a lot of you, at least on social media and or SMS, have talked about what you're hoping to see in a new Kenya. You said a lot of you were driven to go to the votes because of job creation. You want to take a look at employment, the issue of unemployment being addressed, food security, and health as well, healthcare. Of course, Kenya being one of 8 countries in Africa that have made no progress, especially in reducing maternal deaths. That's, of course, according to statistics and what they're saying. When it looks at unemployment, that's again a deplorable situation across many parts of Kenya. So a lot of you were driven to go to the polls because of those issues and hoping that the new government will be able to address that. I want us to now cross over to Hussein Mohammed, who is standing by one of our other election sets here on Citizen TV. He's standing by with experts to analyze the situation and, of course, the voting process today. Let's take it now to Hussein Mohammed.
Thanks, Janet. We're at our analysis center, and like you said, it's 2 minutes. In fact, now 1 minute to 6 p.m., and voting is still going on in some areas. This and more, of course, will be analyzed by one of the drafters of the Constitution. That is Bob Mkangi, who is a lawyer now. Of course, he was a former member of the Committee of Experts that drafted the Constitution. It's 6 p.m. now. Yes. Voting is still going on. Yep. Most people are talking about the 6-ballot system. You're among the drafters. Of course, Kenyans wanted that, but you're among the drafters of that. Yes. Do you think that is one of the reasons, or is it the major reason why this is happening?
It could be one of the major reasons, because for Kenyans who are participating today in actually employing the people who will serve them in the next government, previously were used to employing 3 people, or people to occupy 3 positions in government. That was the president, the member of parliament, and the local government councillor. But now, through the views of Kenyans, with the issues of devolution, and the feeling that they wanted to still participate in the hiring of servants in government, and especially for these elective positions, chose to elect these 6 people for these positions. Yes. And definitely this being the first time that we are all going through this, it's taking some of us a bit more time to be able to work through the 6 ballot papers. And for some areas, you'll discover that even for a particular position, you might have very many people vying for that position. And so for Kenyans to take time to even find the person that they want to vote for might take a bit longer. But coupled with that, we know the other issues that have been reported, a few hitches, the
people started late,
starting late. And even in some instances, people feeling that probably the officials handling the exercise are not moving as fast as is required.
Do you think it could have been managed better by the IBC? They did mock elections.
Definitely. I think there's always room for improvement. And I think considering the challenges that IBC have been facing, coming, I would say, late into the game, considering when the new commission came into place, the issues that, the milestones that we've gone through as a country, because you have to remember that elections is not just this event. This is the milestone event, but it's been a whole process that IEBC has managed to manage over the period. Delimitation of constituencies, you know, the new boundaries, undertaking to have a new voter register, 14 million Kenyans registering for that. We had the party nominations, the campaigns went through, and then here we are today participating in the general elections. So I think it's been a learning experience, a first in many instances. These are the first elections under the new constitution, the first elections after the post-election violence. So for the issues that have come about, I think we will take them as lessons that we will ensure that we repair the same in the future. Maybe just to add that at least where the issues have come out, the delays, the BVR kits failing, IEBC has been able to come out and actually acknowledge and take responsibility for those issues, but also provide avenues of how to repair what has gone wrong. We know, like, where there are delays in opening the stations, time has been added to compensate for those stations where they started late, where the BVR kits failed, use of the manual register. So at least there's been some level of response to the issues that have been or have come out as hitches.
This was unforeseen. Obviously, nobody saw this coming.
Yes.
The same way we don't see, we can't see now the adverse effects. It definitely must have some adverse effects. We saw how long the queues were.
Yes.
What do you think the adverse effects will be later? Because this may go on up to, people may go voting up to 7 o'clock.
That's true, or even longer. Because I remember seeing long queues in some stations, just a few minutes to closing the poll. And as it is right now, and as IEBC has provided, that so long as you are in the queue or you're in the station by 5 p.m., then they will accommodate you and you must vote. Just the same way as it is in banks, that so long as you're within, you know, the bank tellers or the bank will attend to you. So when looking at the length of these queues, you can foresee that going on late into the night. So the challenges or some of the issues that come about, how well those stations will be able to manage themselves, especially now under the cover of the dark, of the night. Issues of security might become a challenge, but I believe that IEBC, foreseeing this from early in the morning, that they will probably go late into the night, have taken adequate measures. Adversely, or how people might perceive this afterwards would depend on the how these issues are widespread. Because if it does come out that there were pockets and different incidents in different places, then I don't think that it would come out as a big problem. But if it comes out as an issue that's widespread and cuts across many areas, then definitely those are issues that people can use to test or to puncture the credibility of the whole exercise. But as I said before, I think for me the clincher has been in IEBC coming out to repair these issues, especially at the national level. And I hope that is also happening in the polling stations, where the officials are coming out to explain to wananchi what is going on and alternative plans to accommodate them.
A very, very high voter turnout. In fact, it's very hard to determine whether it's a high or low voter turnout until we count the results of the ballots have been counted. But everybody today, including the IEBC, is saying it's a really, really high voter turnout. Why do you think so? Why do you think Kenyans have really not to vote?
One, there is the acknowledgement by Kenyans and in activating the first article of the Constitution that they are the people who have the mamlaka, sovereignty, and it is through this process that they are able to convey this authority to people who will serve us as leaders or holders of different offices. So in bearing in mind that they acknowledge this as not only their constitutional right, but also their constitutional duty and responsibility as citizens of this nation. They have come out in large numbers and also heeding the call from the different candidates, and especially the presidential candidates, that you need to come out in large numbers. And the other factor is the high stakes that this election does hold, and that everyone does feel that their vote counts, that it is your vote that can make or break the future that you think voting for a particular candidate would have an effect in the future of this country. So I think all these are very alive to many Kenyans, and that's why they have turned out in large numbers to exercise their democratic right, but also to undertake this very important duty and responsibility for the country.
Is there also a belief, you may say, in the new constitution that for the first time they really want to be part of this, because they know now in Kenya we have systems in place?
I think so too. I think so. And bearing in mind that after the post-election violence, Kenyans have come through a journey and we're still traveling that journey. And we have done a few things that we are supposed to have done in ensuring that we have a better future. Enacting or promulgating a new constitution, ensuring that we have an electoral management body in the form of IEBC that has credibility, that was hired in the fashion that we saw, open and transparent and competitive, which has brought some level of legitimacy and credibility to that institution. Having a new set of electoral pieces of legislation, I think that gives confidence to the Kenyans that they can come out and cast their vote, and their vote will count. In other words, their voice will be heard and taken into consideration. I think those things vis-a-vis 2007, 2008 have created confidence in Kenyans, and that's why they have turned out. And as you say, they also feel that once the outcome is pronounced, then they will take charge and feel responsible for whatever will happen to Kenya in the future, and especially for many of us, for our children, and a better Kenya is what everyone is asking for. A better Kenya, taking care of and erasing the embarrassment that we suffered upon ourselves in 2007 and 8.
So, do you think that it will have an effect in tallying? Of course, we've had the IBC saying, of course, they have the legal leeway to do this in 7 days, but they've said they can be telling us who's the next president or the presidential results within 48 hours. Now, with this kind of queuing we're seeing, this kind of high voter turnout, is that really possible?
It might be possible if the counting and the tallying is done with speed, and there are not many questions, especially at the polling stations, about how that is going on. We know that the good thing is the results will be relayed electronically and very fast, and as they come in without the further verification at certain centers for some of these results. So it could be possible that we get an outcome, a declaration within a short time. But there is obviously the challenge that has been created in that voting in various stations will go probably late into the night, so that will affect the counting. But I believe that maybe if not 48 hours, within 72 hours, we'll be able to make calls on certain positions. And even, I believe, probably by tomorrow morning, we'll have results from various polling stations. There are some of those that I think counting has started, because there are no queues as of 5 p.m.
Indeed, counting has started.
Smaller.
Counting has started, indeed, and what you're seeing on the screens right now is a live feed from Bomas of Kenya. That is the National Tallying Center. What you're seeing real-time figures now. So indeed, in some polling stations, counting has already been done, and people are receiving the results. That is a live feed from Bomas of Kenya. That is the National Tallying Center. Remember, the IBC making it clear that in the places where people started late, voting hours will be extended, and as long as you were in the voting line or queue before 5 p.m., then you'll be allowed to vote. Let me go back again to Bob Kangi, our analyst, the lawyer and analyst here. Not a lot of incidents we saw today compared to other elections, but then a very glaring incident in Mombasa.
Yes, sadly so, and we have to pay homage to the police officers who paid that ultimate price of actually losing their lives, unfortunately, in defense of our right, in defense of how we Kenyans can be able to exercise our duty. And so we have to pay homage to those police officers who were felled last night, and pay condolences to their families.
But sadly, this is something that had been warned about before. The intelligence had talked about it.
Yes.
Just as early as this week, late last week, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights talked about it, about some areas where they know there may be problems, especially in the coast region, issues to do with the MRC, and this is happening again.
Unfortunately, so definitely it sends anyone to ask whether there were adequate security measures in those places. But I think the security apparatuses have tried very hard under these circumstances. We know the number of police officers that have been deployed nationally. So it actually tests their capacity, because part of it would be to ensure that the voting goes on right. But we know the country is still going on, taking care of other duties, for example, detecting crime, dealing with other criminals, those threats, the terrorist threat, and threats from other angles. So I think the capacity of our security bodies has really been tested and stretched to best level. So I think maybe the question of whether the preparations were better, whether the police officers were well equipped, etc. But
should be more preventive measures, isn't it?
Yes,
because they knew. And they've been told that
apparently, as we saw, that some of these organizations had actually sent threats. Our prayer is that the measures that have been taken now, sending more police officers in those hot areas, as we might term them, and also the fact that now people are more aware and more vigilant, that nothing of this nature will happen again until we finalize this exercise.
Yes. And this is 99,000 we have security officers on the ground.
On the ground right now.
Isn't that worrying?
Yes, we can say it is worrying, and that's why I was saying whether the question would be whether that is adequate. But I think, considering the circumstances of even the police, National Police Service, a new command structure, and I believe even that the 99,000 officers is an amalgamation of different security institutions of the country, because I don't think we have 99,000 police officers, regular police officers. So it's very many security organs that have come together to give us that police service, I believe. And so I think the preparation that they had put together, they felt was adequate, but those unfortunate incidents did take place. My prayer, and I believe the prayer of many Kenyans, is that that be the one and only, or those incidents that have taken place, the only incidents we're going to see during this process, and the measures that have been taken so far to fill in those holes will ensure that everything now runs smoothly until we finalize the voting and the general elections altogether.
Inspector General of Police David Kimayo, of course, went to Mombasa. After that, we're still waiting to hear his assessment of the situation after 6 police officers were killed by suspected MRC members. What you're seeing on your screens right now is a live feed from the Bomas of Kenya, the National Tallying Center. So what you can see there are real-time figures of numbers that are coming in, votes that are being tallied from different places in this country. Remember, as they keep coming in, we'll be telling you, we'll be tallying them for you as well, and show you the figures as they come in. Let's go back to the high voter turnout. What are the reasons you think people really came out to vote like this?
As I mentioned, the one main, we have to remember during the campaign periods, and especially run up to the end of the last 2 weeks, the rallying call from most of the candidates have been, you must turn out in large numbers, that your vote counts, that I need your vote. It's your vote that's going to make the difference. And I think this has been necessary, because if we go by what the polls indicate, that this was going to be a neck-to-neck race, it's going to be a close competition. And so each candidate knew that they needed every man and woman who had registered as a voter and who is their supporter to come out and vote, that one vote could make a difference. And that's why there was a lot of energy employed towards the message that you must come out. And also Kenyans, I think, they've been analyzing what has been going on. And I mean, they have the candidates they support, and they felt that it is their vote really counts. That one vote can make a difference. But also in believing that if they do come out in large numbers and vote for whichever candidate they prefer, probably it would also defeat the necessity of going for the second round.
That is what I was coming to. Is that possible, really? Okay, do you think this may point out to an election being won in the first round?
It could.
Compared to a low voter turnout?
It could, although, you know, it depends on how the voting patterns go. But I think maybe that's one of the reasons, as I said, people believe that if we go out in large numbers, probably the support base or the supporters of the other candidate will not come out in large numbers. So eventually everyone came out, and we have this, you know, lovely voter turnout. And so depending on that, and especially depending on how the voter turnout has come, is going to be to look like, especially in the so-called swing vote areas, then that could enable a candidate to actually clinch it within the first round. And so that's why, as I was saying, they really went out to call out, you know, calling out Kenyans to come out and vote in large numbers, knowing that each and every vote would make a difference. And that also resonated with Kenyans, believing that their voices, or each and every voice, would count in this election.
Your assessment and what the pollsters have been saying about the neck-to-neck race, Joseph, do you think it's possible to go for a runoff? Or rather, do you think it's possible to win in the first round for either side?
It's possible, because there are many things that happen between, you know, campaigns and on the material day. So you can't predict that, depending on how the supporters of a certain candidate behave on the material day, whether they choose to come out and vote or not. You know, so some of those issues might make a difference in who comes out to vote, and how that exercise finalizes. Yes.
Okay. Remember, what you're seeing right now on your screens is live figures from the Bomas of Kenya National Tallying Center. Vote counting, of course, has started since polls closed, but of course they didn't close in all polling centers. We had some incidents where polling started a bit late, and so the IBC has said there will be an extension of voting hours. But then, of course, those that started early with a relative small number of people closed by 5 o'clock. The votes have been counted, and that is what you can see on your screens. And remember, IBC also making it clear that if you were in the queue by 5 p.m., then you will be allowed to vote. For now, I'd like to take you to Bomas of Kenya. Well, I'm getting that we'll be going there in a short while. Bomas of Kenya National Tallying Center, where vote counting is going on. That is what you can see on the screen, real-time figures of what is going on. Let's go back to our discussion with Bob Mkangi. You're talking about the issue of people trying to make, after listening to the politicians with their rallying call in the last 2 weeks, especially in coming to vote in the first round, making sure that they win in the first round for their respective parties or respective coalitions. What are the reasons you think there was a high voter turnout? We've never really experienced this.
Yes, it's true. The polling station I went to, and the time I went to, because I think I voted there the third time. The time I went to, I expected a certain scenario, from my previous experience. But when I got to the station, at the same time that I've been going to the station, in previous elections and during the referendum, I was very surprised. The queue was long, bending, and so. But it was also exciting, just noting that actually Kenyans have heeded the call of a better future for the country, and they've come out to vote. One, they've come out to vote early, very early. So they are eager to make a point. Secondly, they have come out in large numbers to do this. And as I mentioned earlier, I think there are all these issues that have been playing in our minds as Kenyans, as citizens of this country. And the gravity of the fact that we are a generation that is responsible, very responsible. The Kenyans who are above 18 and who are going to participate in this vote are going to determine the future and fate of this country. Noting that the post-election violence was an incident that definitely traumatized each and one of us, mentally, and most of us physically. And we feel that we owe it to ourselves and also to the future to really come out, participate, make our voices heard, do what our citizenship entitles us, but also behoves of us, that we must come out and vote in new leaders that are going to steer this country in a new direction. So there are those aspects, and talking to many Kenyans on the queue and in other circles, that you feel or you felt that people really are heeding that call of responsibility, and they are also very much alive to what we as a generation have in our hands and what we can do to steer Kenya into a better country. So coming out to support whoever you want to support, as we did today, and some of us are still doing, is in a way, participating in a cleansing but also a healing exercise for this nation. And I keep impressing upon the issue that it is after the post-election violence. And also for all of us to believe that we've come a long way. 2008, we were not very sure where we'd be as a country. Many people didn't believe that today was going to happen. And so I think some of us have come out, most of us have come out to actually also show belief and trust in the direction that we want to take, but also show the rest of the world, because they are watching us, that 2007, 2008, we stumbled, but we have the resolve to move forward as a nation. Yes. 6-ballot system.
We've seen some confusing the colors, putting a ballot paper in a different, in another ballot box that is not meant for the ballot paper. IBC is saying such spoiled votes.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
I heard there's a technical term that there are straight votes, straight ballots.
Straight ballots.
That they end up in the wrong boxes. And I think when it happened, and one interesting case is that it happened to a candidate, a former member of parliament, Professor Kamar. And so it threw the entire question as to whether if it can, that mistake can be done by somebody of that stature, then what happens to, wananchi? But IBC had come out and explained, and I think during the voter education period, they really impressed upon Kenyans
how it's supposed to be done,
the importance of putting the right ballot in the right ballot box. And they even today came out to explain clearly why that is so, because the tallying will be done depending on a position. For example, when they tally, and they'll do that fast, the votes count and tally the votes for the presidential position, then if it's in a polling station, they'll open that box, remove the seal, open the box, count the ballots, put them back and reseal them. And so that is done, they finalize, and they go maybe to the National Assembly. So it will be difficult after you finalize tallying for the president, and then you find a ballot paper in the box for the member to the National Assembly. Now to start changing the math, and say, oh, there's one or two here. So what do you do? That takes time, it's confusing, it opens the whole process. So I think at that juncture of saying, if that happens, that's a stray ballot and it will be rejected, to me is understandable. But again, there were measures to mitigate these incidents. I mean, there are people, I have a friend who's colorblind, you can't distinguish certain colors.
Those who are told to,
but there was the voter education, and IEBC has also provided people who can assist at the polling station. So whereby if you know that you have those challenges, or when you get there and you can really not distinguish, then you can always ask for assistance. I remember I took, that's the one part that I took a lot of time just to make sure
you're putting it in the right.
I'm putting it in the right box.
Thank you very much. Lawyer Bob Mkangi, who's also a former drafter of the Constitution with the Committee of Experts. Thank you so much for your analysis. I remember what you're seeing live on TV, live real-time results from the Bomas of Kenya National Tallying Center. Vote counting has started in various places, and of course, the tallying you see is what is bringing about the results we're seeing at Bomas of Kenya. And remember, the IBC said if you are in the voting queue by 5 p.m., then you'll be allowed to vote. And where voting started late, then they'll be compensated and you'll be allocated more time to vote. Let me take you now back to Janet Mogwa at our news studio.
All right, thank you for that, Hussein Mohammed, of course, having spoken to Bob Mkangi, a political analyst, on the voting process, his own views on how the IEBC performed, whether or not they could have done a better job, the discussion that will certainly be on people's lips for a long time to come. But as we've been showing you for the last few minutes, these are live results coming in from the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya. Results of the votes counted so far. So this is not a complete picture, but I want us to just take a look at what it says at the moment. If you take a look at that, out of the 14,350,824 registered voters, the valid votes so far are 99,772. All indications right now at this moment is that Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, the presidential flag bearer on a TNA ticket, has garnered 53.28% of the total number of votes counted so far across the country, while Raila Odinga, of course, the presidential flag bearer on an ODM ticket, has garnered 43.77%, of course. So that's a look at what the results are at the moment. IEBC, we saw just a moment ago some of the tallying clerks, of course, that are counting the votes. This is really just a snapshot of very few votes that have been counted thus far. As we'd mentioned earlier, polling stations, some of them have closed, others are still yet to close. So what we're looking at is very few votes that have been counted, but this is what the IEBC has released. You can see it live on your screens. Those are the results, of course, the provisional results. So we're going to also go into some of the counties where voting has already ended in some of the polling stations there. Now, of course, some of the counties had a lower number of registered voters than others. In some polling stations, there was a few number of voters as well that turned out to cast their ballots. So, of course, we are looking at just a few number of votes thus far. So that's a look at the votes so far. All right, there we have it, the IEBC National Tallying Center streaming in results of what they've gathered so far. Of course, let's get some more context and information on this, and let's go straight to Abdi Osman. He's standing by at the Bombers of Kenya. Abdi, what can you tell us?
Well, Janet, the IEBC National Tallying Center is the epitome of what a day it's been for the IEBC in terms of organizational skills and ensuring security, right from this morning when reports of attacks filtered through from Mandera and all the way to Mombasa. They're leaving nothing to chance here at the IEBC National Tallying Center. We took quite some time just to make it into this auditorium here. We are part of the lucky few, and what a few minutes it's been so far. The ultimate test of technology was seen as the EVID equipment this morning, which had somewhat collapsed a little. But most importantly, here, the results are filtering in seamlessly and flawlessly, according to the IEBC officials, coming in every few seconds. Such that by the last time I was checking on the screen, which you've been able to show our viewers on the video wall, the difference between the two leading presidential contenders was always slimming down to a narrow margin of about 1,000. And as I stand right in front of this camera, it is almost impossible to say you will be giving the very latest results. However, nonetheless, and most importantly, the results have come in from different centers, most of them on average having closed at about 5 p.m. and the counting is underway. Most of them have been able to see have had about 1,000 to 2,000 votes only counted, so it's still early days. The percentages you're seeing are below 30,000 votes, and we've been able to see that the traditional strongholds of the presidential candidates have played to the expectations of those candidates. We're seeing that Raila Odinga, the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy presidential candidate, has been able to garner quite a good percentage of votes in Kitui, Machakos, even Lamu. Uhuru Kenyatta scoring highly in Trans Nzoia, West Pokot, Uasin Gishu. Now, the results that had filtered through in those particular counties clearly showing that anytime, as I say, this is very early days, it's a very small percentage. Some of those areas have only, the results that have filtered through are only about 2% of the votes being counted, so it's still early days. Some of the candidates were getting about 90% of the votes in those areas. The IEBC, seeing the sensitivity of the matter, will give the next update on the presidential candidate's performance in probably half an hour's time or any time from now. They've now focused solely, as you've seen on your giant screens, on the results from the counties. They've been giving us plenty of entertainment here in the auditorium because patience, it's going to be a long night. As you remember, the IEBC chairman Ahmed Isaac Hassan said that the earliest we should expect the final provisional presidential tally should be in 48 hours time. And let's just also focus on some of the things that were given it at the IEBC's press briefing earlier on. They did manage to speak about the difficulties experienced in different parts of the country, thanking Kenyans for what has been so far an exceptionally huge turnout during this general election, historic in every sense of the word, first ever under the Constitution promulgated in August 2010. But more importantly, we're going to be voting for 6 different posts. And here at the Bombers National Tallying Center 2013, the focus will be on the presidential vote, and the results are already streaming in. So the action that's coming in here, frame by frame, video grab by video grab, is essentially what will keep Kenyans captivated across the country, watching the giant screens here at the IEBC, which I'm telling you has proven that despite the earlier hiccups, despite the tragedy that visited some parts of the country, the MRC attack at the coast, the voter who unfortunately died and while queuing at Karen Hardy station, and attacks in Mandera, and generally some hiccups, technologically speaking, in some of the stations. Indeed, this looks like a very promising evening as far as the results are concerned. We've got a camera permanently fixed on the giant screen that's giving you those results. The IEBC officials also, apart from thanking Kenyans for being patient, also insist that these are provisional results. Very important that it doesn't excite or elicit any form of reaction other than the peace we've witnessed today. One of the areas that was hard hit this morning was Laisamis, where voting apparently started very late. Wajir South had also one polling station which had serious problems. Kitui also had some problems when some of the ballot boxes were destroyed and a replacement had to be found from one of the nearby warehouses. Stepping in, contingency plans seem to be working to the very millisecond as earlier planned by the IEBC. There was a late start all around the country, according to the IEBC Chief Electoral Officer James Oswago, and they've said that they will compensate those centers. So as we speak now, several polling stations have closed their doors, but those who are inside those polling stations have been assured they will vote. Others still have their stations open, largely because when they open late, they will have to close at the time lost will have to be factored in and compensated. Now, the other thing that has also happened is that they say that noted there were challenges in some area in the electronic voter identification equipment, getting some problems here and there, but that has since been sorted out. A polling clerk, this is quite interesting. The IEBC moved swiftly to enforce the new electoral laws. A polling clerk was arrested in Kitui Central for issuing more than one polling paper, a ballot paper to a voter, and he's now under police investigation. The message right across the board has been that the Electoral Commission, the IEBC, will not tolerate any lawlessness, any malfeasance or misbehavior by electoral officials. The IEBC keen to crack the whip where it feels necessary, stepping in with the logistical support, and most importantly, ensuring that it keeps Kenyans updated. Any moment from now, they will be giving us an update right from this auditorium, just to keep us updated on what's really going on at the tallying center. Now, right outside this auditorium, the level of security hitherto unprecedented. Coming into the Bomas of Kenya, roadblocks all the way to this very spot, and then coming in there, everybody, the names have to have been accredited, our names have been sent here, and then the most thorough checks. Now, nothing is being left to chance. You realize the police officers whom the IEBC Chief Electoral Officer James Oswago and the chairman Ahmed Isaac paid tribute to lost their lives while protecting the public. Such are the vagaries of the electoral process. Anything can happen any moment, and this being the National Tallying Center, they have to ensure everything is well protected. And then the results, as you can see, are still being streamed. I hope you can have a look at the video wall that's showing you those results. They're coming in by the minute, and they're changing by the few seconds. Very close to where I'm standing, the IEBC's control room is abuzz with activity. The engineers are working round the clock. The IT personnel, they're all trying one thing, just to make sure that there is no break or let up in between. But the public have been asked to be very patient. You realize the stations that are still open, they will be closing at undesignated times, the times that will factor in the time they lost. And as a result, the IEBC officials know very well that that means the vote counting will start much later. The results, therefore, there are going to be certain breaks in between. But they're promising the moment the results come in, IEBC Chief Electoral Officer James Oswago did mention this a little earlier. He said, we get the results The auditorium giant screens get the results at the same time. The media gets the results at the same time. And as you can see, the entertainment is going on. This hall is expected to be filled with a lot of observers. I've spotted a few high commissioners, foreign missions here. I've spotted quite a number of international observers, the international media. Kenya is under the scrutiny of the entire globe. This is a country which had enjoyed fairly good prominence as far as peace and stability was concerned, but within a few days and weeks of madness, the country got all the negative publicity you would not wish your worst enemy. And what a great start today. The long queues, peaceful, quiet, calm across the country. Everybody enjoying every single moment of this historic election, the first under a new constitution. As I said, apart from some of the things that the IEBC had said earlier, they did condole with the families of the slain officers who died while protecting voters from attackers, suspected to be MRC members. These officers today, alongside those who are still alive, working around the clock to ensure security, as well as those electoral officials working extra time round the clock, patiently advising the public, and most importantly the voters who are patiently queuing in line waiting for their turn to make the decision known. Every individual decision counts. These are the silent heroes of a country which is experiencing a giant reawakening. I hope again, if you can see on the screens, the results are changing by the frame, by the second, by the millisecond. Just have a look at that and you will realize the scale and scope of what I'm telling you. Every single video grab frame of history is being captured. Every digit that changed by the second is available. Such transparency, a pledge the IEBC says it will live up to, standards it says it set during the by-election when it was known as the nascent organization called the Interim Independent Electoral Commission. Now it's a fully grown giant electoral body with much under its belt. The IEBC is facing the ultimate test. Here at the auditorium, the provisional presidential results are coming in, but equally at the tallying centers for the counties, they're getting all the other results going on. So as far as efficiency is concerned, one would say perhaps it cannot be better than this, but the IEBC is saying, you know what, we've learned our lessons. They've been hard lessons as far as technology is concerned. The IEBC Chief Electoral Officer at one point pointing out that so fragile were the EVID equipment, they were breaking along the way. Replacements had to be sought. So if there's anything, Janet, that we've learned from this particular process, it's been that the IEBC simply had worked through its work plan very well. They've been able to get contingency plans. Now, the other thing is that as we speak right now, across the country, there are people who are still voting, and as a result, the IEBC says it's reassuring them. They've spent long hours. As I told you, there's the tragic news of a voter who collapsed while lining and queuing to vote at the Karen Hadi. These are the brave Kenyans who took their time to make their decision known. So the country, as the pulse of the nation is measured, as the Ballot 2013 takes center stage, as the papers are counted at the different tallying centers, as the officers sweating after a very difficult day continue keeping vigil and working round the clock to ensure security, we here at the National Tallying Center to take a pledge to ensure that these results are streamed. And in living up to that very promise, how about this? I'm going to leave you watch our results on a giant screen. My director will ensure that you will be watching the results as they're being streamed in as I get you some of the other results. So let's have a look at the results as they stream in, and you can keep enjoying the music in the meantime. But as I was telling you before, let's just give you a quick recap of some of the things that happened earlier in the day. Voting took off to a slow start in most stations across the country, but largely uneventful in many parts of the country, quite peaceful. However, at the coast, there were serious incidents of insecurity. In one instance, officers were attacked, and several, including an officer commanding a police division, lost their lives. 6 officers, including 6 attackers. And then we also had incidents in Lysamis where there was a late start. Wajir South, there was a late start, and that was sorted out immediately as the pledge by the IEBC that the stations will remain open to compensate that. An electoral official was arrested in Kitui, for your recap, and that is a polling clerk. And they also said that they will compensate the hours that they lost. Most importantly, the IEBC regretted the deaths of the officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. They also paid tribute to those officers, and they said the electronic transmission of results will go smoothly. That is going smoothly. Let me leave you watch some of these results on your video wall and on your screen, the results that are coming in.
Naziona?